Hey there, Coffee Cup Counselor here. I am currently involved in an ethics course as part of my work, and we're going to deep dive into it, and we're going to do it quick. We're going to do ethics in a nutshell. Ethics is the philosophical discipline of principles governing people's conduct, activities, situations, and morals of good, bad, right, wrong, just, and unjust. Ethics can be rules of conduct by connotation. Morals can be personal values by connotation, and both can be used interchangeably sometimes, but they're not necessarily the same. They are also a framework for evaluating how people ought to act and are guidelines to establish right action versus wrong action, answering questions such as how we ought to live, what is the good life, which is known as eudaimonia or flourishing, and it's a framework of the list of specific acts or behavior that is neither specific nor exhausted, and it's not made to judge good or bad neither. So you have all that. Let's talk about Jeremy Bentham for a minute. He looked like the Quaker Oats man. Let me show you. There's Quaker Oats man, aka William Penn, and there is philosopher Jeremy Bentham, his counterpart. They look like they could be brothers. Anyway, Bentham, who was born in 1748, he created a theory called utilitarianism, where we are morally required to do whatever causes the greatest amount of pleasure minus pain. So, and both of those have to be involved. It has to be the greatest amount of pleasure, and it also has to be the least amount of pain. He used a game of pushpin, which was big in the 1700s, and he used its simplicity of that little game that they used to play. He used that to talk about how the simple math, arithmetic theory of morality made utilitarianism simple. Didn't always work like that. Robert Nozick, who was alive till just recently, about 20 or so years ago, 25 years ago, he created something called the thought experiment and talked about, okay, what if we could just be pre-programmed into a thought machine, not actually exist, but we could experience all the good things, experience kindness, experience love, experience morality, experience these things. And really though, does the experience machine or the thought experiment, does that equate to actual real living? Is utilitarianism then a mistake? Counter argument for it. However, Bentham did have some good points, such as the following. And this wasn't published till after he died in the early 1800s, but he had a publication called Offenses Against Oneself. And it was the very first time that homosexual acts were, he wrote about them, how they should not be considered a punishable offense, which is huge because during that time, homosexual acts were considered heinous, punishable by death in some circumstances. He said, no, why should that be? If it's two people, it's consensual and it's pleasure and they're happy, why punish that? Why punish happiness? So, in a sense, utilitarianism does have its good, and it does hold water. H.J. McCloskey was another guy who came up with a thing. A sheriff who knows that a certain person did not commit the crime, but all of the people in the public believe that he did. What should this sheriff do? Should he go ahead and frame the dude, let him be guilty, let him hang, so that the masses don't riot and kill and go crazy? Would ruining one person's life be good at the expense of being sure that many others are not affected? Doesn't always work though. And then you had Nietzsche, and Nietzsche pretty much said, is there even a such thing as objective moral facts? Is it real? Is there an objective moral law? He didn't like it. He pretty much said, you know what, morality, it sucks. Don't do it at all. He didn't mean it like that, but he was talking about the origins of it, where, in like pre-Roman times, the good was associated with the rich, the aristocratic. And the bad was associated with poor people, which is terrible. And if you go into Germanic language, the word schlecht means bad in German, and the word schlicht means evil. And those two words are very closely related in sound and spelling, schlecht and schlicht. So Nietzsche might have been onto something with that. He talked about a great revolt in which the bad turned the table on the good and the bourgeois, and the bad ended up becoming good. And you know what? At the end of the day, who really cares? Nietzsche was silly. What's good is good, regardless of who's doing it and whose label it is. I get his point, but at the end of the day, virtue and heading toward eudaimonia, or flourishing, and living something called phronesis, which Aristotle called it, which is practical wisdom and a good life. That's what's most important. You had Peter Singer, who about 50 years ago wrote Famine, Affluence, and Morality, where he said that everyone you ever met is a morally bad person. He said that, if you have any extra money, you need to give it all away. Don't use it on extra food. Don't use it on McDonald's. Don't use it on newer clothes. Give it. I think that was governmentally pushed, though, because he talked a lot about giving it to people like UNICEF, who took your money when you donated it and redistributed it around the world. And it was for that cause. So I don't know about Peter Singer. Not only that, but if you have some extra money, why not indulge? What's wrong with that? Why give it to someone a million miles away? Which is where proximity comes into effect sometimes. Proximal versus distal. How close are you to being able to help someone? Are you walking through a lake area? You're walking by a pond and you see a kid drowning. You're close to him. You should definitely pull him out. If you don't, and the only reason you didn't do it is because, well, my pants might get muddy. They might get dirty. I didn't really want to pull him out. I didn't want to save him. He died. I'm sorry. You'd be looked at like a horrible person because you're in proximal distance to being able to help someone versus way distal, like given to UNICEF a million miles away on the other side of the planet or whatever. So you have that. You have environmental ethics, the concept of sensuous immediacy, that is, using the environment as an object of consumption versus making it sustainable and preserving it. That's a ethical dilemma of sorts in environmental ethics. Then you have virtue ethics, which goes back to the Aristotle, the flourishing that I was just talking about a moment ago, where you have conduct, teachings, philosophy, and morals that emphasize the righteous living, more so than just rules-based or consequence-based living choices. Plato, Aristotle, Mencius, and even Confucius in China delved into this virtue type of ethics. More recently, the year I was born, in 1982, Carol Gilligan made a publication that pretty much said, you know what, all these old-ass philosopher dudes, they sucked. All their stuff was so masculine. What about the femme side of it? What about nursing? What about emotions? Carol Gilligan created this care ethics type of ethics that was kind of nurture-based, which is cool. But, while she was pretty much dogging masculine ethics, masculine morals, she did the same thing. She made it too feminine, is what some critics say. It was too femme-based. It was too woman-based. It was biased. It was sexist. It was sexist toward feminism, toward female. So you have that too. Meta-ethics is the study of the nature of morality. Normative ethics is establishing morals and norms and standards, like deontology or utilitarianism. And then you have applied ethics, which is actually applying these ethical principles to real-world issues like medicine or business. There's a lot more than this, but this is a 10-minute video, so I'm going to close. Hopefully, I delved into things a little bit, and you got a little bit of use out of this video. Thank you.